Hello and welcome to the Red Zone podcast, the tight end analysis. I'm Big Italy 42, here with the author of this great piece, Josh Shepardson at BChad50. And of course, there's going to be no surprise at the top here at tight end. And if you're surprised by this, then you're probably in the wrong sport here playing NFL DFS. Rob Gronkowski, as you put it here, it's the Patriots coming off a bye week. It's Rob Gronkowski against Dallas, whose defense has looked mediocre at best so far this season. Patriots, as always, have a huge team total. I mean, this one, if you can afford him, it's just the obvious top play. But there are some other options, so he's not necessarily a must play, but he's certainly the best play.
Yeah, and one thing that I love with Gronk, really only on DraftKings, is the fact that he's really affordable, comparable to the top plays at other positions. And with some of these tight ends, and we'll get to a few of the value plays, I know there's one in particular that we both really like, you can actually use Gronk with another tight end because he performs like a receiver. And if you treat him as such and you put him in your flex spot and use one of the value plays at tight end, you've actually got a chance to get a guy that can put up numbers that are comparable to the top wideouts, but do so at a reduced rate compared to them. So, that's one way to try and get Gronk in there. On FanDuel, it's either you pay up for him at tight end or you don't, though. So either you've got the budget to do it, or there definitely are some value plays that we like. But, I mean, any slate that Gronk's on, he's in a class of his own. It's really not close. There are some other tight ends that are very talented, but there's no question who the most talented tight end is in the league right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And then if we're talking about guys who are similar players in that they're big, huge targets, big, strong targets that emerging, not quite in a Gronk type of way, but who's really ever going to do that? Travis Kelce's next up. You mentioned here the Bears 24th in the league, according to Football Outsiders, against tight ends. And, with the addition of Jeremy Maclin, this is an offense. We'll talk about the defense a different time, but this is an offense that's, they're moving the ball and, they have weapons now. Before it was, obviously no wide receiver touchdown for over a year. You didn't really have red zone targets. They were underutilizing Kelce last year, but now you see he's finally playing a ton of snaps. He's running a lot of routes, and I mean, that's good news for anyone that's playing that's rostering Travis Kelce, because he's a really tough cover.
Yeah, and the volume's there for him now. The efficiency's been there since day one. When last year he was underutilized, but the efficiency was there. This year, his efficiency's down just a tiny bit, as I noted in his yards per route run. Slight drop this year, but still really good. Rates really well there, and it more than makes up for by an increased volume, an increased number of snaps played, routes run. And you look at that team total, and that is juicy this week. They're at home. They face a bad Bears defense. And the nice thing about that big team total is who the key players are for the Chiefs. It's Travis Kelce, Jeremy Maclin, and Jamal Charles. And that's 3 mouths to feed. I'm going to say Kelce's going to get a nice chunk of that 27.25 Vegas total that we have right now for the Chiefs, according to the lineup optimizer and our numbers there. And I like him against the Bears, and really good after the catch. Basically, everything that you're looking for. The nice thing about that after the catch stuff with Kelce is we know that Alex Smith isn't a strong-arm quarterback, likes to dump it off to his guys short and kind of let them do the work, and Kelce's more than capable of that.
Yeah, and especially with an offensive line that's allowed him to get sacked a ton. I mean, going to be a lot of short passes, which is even better in the PPR or even half PPR format for a guy like Kelce.
Yep.
Charles Clay next up, a guy that, like you mentioned, this is the guy we kind of teased earlier. You and I both love him. He's a guy that I have tentatively slotted into a lot of cash games right now. Saw a ton of targets last week, even had a touchdown called back on a questionable call, as I'm sure you know as a Bills fan, and I know as a Tyrod Taylor owner from last week. But Charles Clay, seeing a ton of volume, like we said. He's fairly priced. FanDuel price isn't ideal, but still under 6K, barely 4K on DraftKings for a guy that saw double-digit targets last week.
Yeah, absolutely in love with the DraftKings price. Really like the FanDuel price because, I mean, even though he's a little bit closer in proximity to Kelce, one of the elite plays, still does save you enough money that it's meaningful, that you can spend it elsewhere, that you can upgrade another position. And while really not downgrading at tight end, Clay has emerged back-to-back really strong showings. He and Taylor seem to be on the same page big time. And Sammy Watkins nicked up. Whether Watkins plays or not, we know that even if Watkins is in there, he's not going to be 100%. And more likely, it seems that he's going to be out. Of course, it's still Thursday. We got a few more days of practice. We'll get a a little bit more light shed on that. But if there's no Watkins, it's the Charles Clay show in the passing game. Yes, they'll get the ball to Percy Harvin some, but the fact that Carlos Williams is going through the NFL's concussion protocol, they don't have anything behind him, all the more reason to think that Clay's going to be really heavily utilized this week. And Football Outsiders ranks this Titans defense dead last defending tight ends, and Clay is the type of athletic tight end that can make that them pay for that poor ranking.
Yeah, absolutely with you there. And then next up, Richard Rodgers, value play extraordinaire on DraftKings, on $2,900, 51 on FanDuel is going to see him with much lower ownership there. But like you mentioned here, Football Outsiders has the Rams 22nd against tight ends. Obviously, this is a potent offensive attack, great aerial attack with Aaron Rodgers, best in the league. Don't need to say too much about that, but we've seen him get red zone looks. He's a big target. And, I mean, I don't think it's going to change throughout the season. You don't have Jordy Nelson to worry about. You're going to be going in the red zone. You're going to be worrying about stopping Randall Cobb. And then if you stop Randall Cobb, you just let Richard Rodgers get his in the red zone because he's not a guy that you're necessarily threatened by. He's not a guy you have to take out of the game plan, which is perfect for a guy in a pass-first offense.
Yeah, and he's a big target. And the fact that not only is he a big target, but he's one that's actually gotten targets from Aaron Rodgers. He's got touchdown grabs in 2 of the 4 games so far this year. And the ceiling isn't super high. He's not one of those freakish athlete tight ends that's going to pile up a ton of yardage, but he's getting looks. He's tallied multiple receptions in every single game so far this year. Unfortunately, he hasn't cracked the 50-yard plateau, but the fact that he's a red zone threat, the fact that he's getting multiple looks a game, he's going to give you more than a bagel. And at $2,900 on DraftKings, you take that because it's just going to let you spend heavily elsewhere around the field.
Yeah, I mean, he's absolutely the guy that you're playing looking for those red zone targets. So certainly don't get him in your lineups and expect an 80, 90-yard performance.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
just not going to happen. Next up, GPP plays, and you mentioned this guy, and seems like a great play in all formats, but as you mentioned in GPP, I mean, he has monster upside as well as a nice floor. Martellus Bennett for the Bears. Jay Cutler, kind of a surprise start last week, returning from his injury. He looked pretty good, actually, and now maybe gets Alshon Jeffrey back, which you would think maybe takes away from Martellus Bennett, but I mean, for me, I think it takes more away from Eddie Royal, who finally had a decent performance and been very underwhelming all season long. So Martellus Bennett, red zone target, yards after the catch monster. I mean, this guy's an enormous target, and he's got tons of rapport with Jay Cutler throughout the year. So this isn't news to anyone here.
No, and as you said, not strictly GPP play. That's where he's listed. He does work in cash games, though, and the Bears are significant underdogs this week, and I think that actually plays into Bennett's hands because if they're playing catch up from the onset of the game, they're going to have to throw the ball somewhere, and that's going to leave plenty of targets for Jeffrey and Bennett and Forte. And Bennett's a guy that's good between the 20s, that's good in the red zone. He's not a Kyle Rudolph where it's touchdown or bust with him. He's an athlete. He's going to get his touches. And last week we saw him reel in 11 receptions, and I obviously that's setting the bar quite high. I'm not expecting that kind of performance, but upwards of a half dozen to 8-9 receptions at more than 10 yards of reception is very much within reach, and obviously he's a red zone threat. So I like Bennett a lot this week.
Yeah, and he's not a guy you can really take out of the game plan because he's so versatile. Because as we saw last week, I mean, there was no Alshon Jeffrey. You tend to think a defense is going to key on a target like Martellus Bennett, and they did. It just didn't work. So,
good luck with that.
yeah, I certainly wouldn't want the task of trying to stop him. Next one, I mean, this one's near and dear to my heart, of course, as a Bengals fan, but I also saw the numbers that you saw there where, yes, they are slightly skewed, as you mentioned here, because Cam Chancellor didn't play the first 2 games, but Seattle has not been good against opposing tight ends this season, and they haven't been particularly great over the past few years even. Certainly not as bad as the numbers indicate this year, but Tyler Eifert is a big target. He's had a couple big games, or at least one really big game so far this season. And like you said, we were talking earlier, there's a different player that Seattle's going to be trying to take out of the game plan, and that guy is not Tyler Eifert.
Yeah, I mean, A.J. Green's a stud. It's not a secret that he's the number 1 target there, that he's Andy Dalton's favorite weapon in that passing game. And, I mean, when you've got a corner like Richard Sherman and you've got a secondary that's going to key in on stopping him, somebody else is going to have to emerge. And Eifert looks like that guy to me. I think they'll use Gio Bernard some out of the backfield as well. But Eifert's a big target. He's tough to guard. He does have one ugly game where he totaled 0 receptions for 0 yards in week 3, but last week he thankfully put that one in the rearview mirror, alleviated any concerns that he was suddenly going to disappear in the passing game. So 3 out of 4 weeks, very usable for fantasy purposes. Gotta like that. Gotta like that he's a big target in the red zone, and I like the advancements from Andy Dalton this year as well. We're seeing a guy that's actually spreading the ball around a little bit more. He doesn't just have that bad quarterback tunnel vision where he's just hawking it to A.J. Green all day. So like the emergence of Eifert, and I do think this is a matchup where you're going to see a lot of people shy away, and I think it's going to result in some super low ownership, which is really appealing in GPPs.
Yeah, and like you mentioned with that 0 catch performance, I mean, he did catch a ball at the goal line, was a touchdown, got overturned, and I mean, that was kind of more a product of game flow because the Ravens just simply could not stop A.J. Green, which certainly doesn't seem like it's going to be the case this week against the Legion of Boom. So that's certainly the game plan I would be throwing out there if I'm Seattle. You let Tyler Eifert beat you. You try to stop A.J. Green. Next up, the hopefully triumphant return of Antonio Gates from his suspension. And as someone who has him stashed in just about every season-long league I'm still in, I'm expecting him to step right in. I mean, this is a Hall of Fame tight end. Had a huge season last year, and as the guy that was really undervalued in redraft leagues, and I think he's going to be undervalued this week as well because, Keenan Allen obviously going to be a popular target. Phillip Rivers played really well in all but one game so far this season. But, I mean, Antonio Gates is one of the best red zone threats in all of football when he's healthy, really even at any position. So I'm definitely on board with this play.
Yeah, the biggest concern for me with Gates is how quickly are they going to just throw a full workload on him? Is he in football shape at this point? If they ease him into action, that hurts his value a little bit. But I don't think that'll be the case. I mean, he's a veteran. He knows what he's got to do to get ready. I don't think that there's any concerns about that. He's played in this offense before. He's played with Rivers, so you've got that rapport. It's not like this is a rookie joining the team 4 weeks into, in week 5 after missing the first 4 weeks of the season. This is a guy that's worked with Rivers throughout his career. So I do think he can step in immediately and make an impact. And really, one of the big motivating factors for this Gates inclusion in the article was the fact that Stevie Johnson and Malcolm Floyd both left Week 4's contest early, nicked up. If either one or both of them are out this week, that's going to put the impetus on Gates to immediately step in and make some contributions because otherwise Phillip Rivers is very shorthanded. And so I think with the safety blanket back, you're going to see Rivers use Gates whether all parties are healthy or not. But if Johnson and Floyd are out, that's just 2 less mouths to feed. And that really leaves Keenan Allen, Antonio Gates, and Danny Woodhead. And that's it.
Yeah, absolutely. So plenty for this mouth to get fed, especially in the red zone. Next up, you got your deep sleeper here, Zach Ertz, and this is it's purely a matchup play. I mean, Ertz hasn't been particularly productive. Sam Bradford finally kind of broke out last week, second half especially, ended up with a nice game with some big plays down the field. And this is a New Orleans defense that just has not looked good. They looked okay last week, but I mean, you got to take that with a grain of salt. This is not an actual Cowboys team. This is about half of a Cowboys offense. Not even half, maybe a third. So I'm certainly not a believer this is all of a sudden a good defensive unit. Rob Ryan's the guy who just keeps his job because his name is Ryan, it seems like. This has been a bad defense for years. And now we get Zach Ertz, tremendous athlete, and New Orleans has been second worst in the league against tight ends so far this season. And you just don't expect that to change much this week.
Yeah, and you have to love when both Football Outsiders and Pro Football Focus, basically the two sources for advanced metrics in football, are both in complete agreement that this is the worst pass defense in football. And Bradford looked good last week. He took some shots down the field. He didn't turn the ball. He didn't throw any interceptions. He had 3 touchdown passes. Finally looks like he's fitting into that Chip Kelly offense. And while Ertz won't be the top target, the fact being tied to an offense that's got a big total that seems to be hitting their stride is always good. And Ertz is a big enough target that should be a red zone threat. And the one thing that really stood out to me when I was digging through the numbers this week is that the routes run edge for Ertz compared to Brent Selleck, because they do like Brent Selleck. They use him as a blocking tight end, but Ertz has actually played 55 more snaps this year than Brent Selleck, and he's run 122 routes to 45 for Brent Selleck. So this is Ertz's show, basically, at tight end these days. So I do feel a little bit more comfortable with him knowing that. But as you said, this is a deep sleeper. Definitely a couple bullet GPP type of play. Not a guy that you should be grabbing a million shares of because he just hasn't really done it yet. We don't have the track record of success to rely on him. But if you want a guy in a perfect situation, you couldn't ask for a better one than Ertz is in.
Yeah, low floor, high ceiling type of guy for your GPPs there. That's going to wrap things up here for the tight end analysis. Find us on Twitter at DF Cafe. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Lots of other great content for your NFL Week 5. And we'll see you guys next time.